So this is obsessive collecting disorder, and it's a combination of really two sets of things. One is my emotional connection to the work, and the other one is my connection to the aesthetic value of the work. So kind of hit with a double whammy, being an artist and being a pack rat, because things they interest me from a number of different perspectives. So some of the work in the show is things that I've collected for a really long time. It has very personal meanings to me. And some of the things have been more recent connections based on a visual interest in color or texture or mark making that influences drawing, but also ties together with the aesthetic of the work that I've collected for a long time. And in some of the work, the two come together. It's been interesting talking to different artists. Like, a lot of people can really they feel a connection with the work. So people can relate to it on a lot of different levels, and as they come in and they see the work, people will say, oh, you know, I've been doing crosswords for 35 years, or I have this strange collection of something. So people, particularly artists, will recognize that things taken out of context have an aesthetic value, and will start to hang on to them and collect them, because you never know when you're going to use them. So artists all relate to it, but I found that it goes beyond that a little bit too. With my partner now, sometimes when we're driving in the car, I tend to, things that I find, sometimes I'll just place on the dashboard, and at the beginning those things would be thrown out. He would say, oh, you know, I cleaned out the car, and I'd say, but where's this piece? So now when there's things placed there, he'll come in and he'll say, oh, this is art, I know not to touch this. So yeah, people will relate to a lot of the things that are more regular things to collect. So the crosswords, or some of the objects like the nest or the insects will be more regular things to collect, and people identify with the visual interest of it, that the drawings come from the interest in the textures that I can use to develop mark making, and the compulsive drawings, the obsessive drawings. Some of the other objects, like the boxes of objects, are it interests me what someone will consider to be a personal treasure, or something that's very precious, and what will be beyond some people's comfort level. It's very strange what some people decide to collect. Well, some people will find it very strange. Other people find it very normal, and there'll be very personal reasons for collecting it. So it interests me to see people's responses to what I'm collecting. Some people are completely grossed out by what's in there. Other people are fascinated by it. But I think everyone has quite a visceral response to it, because the objects are unusual and not what you expect to see. It's not in a traditional collection. The idea of challenging that boundary interests me. I think art's supposed to do that. It's supposed to make us think a little bit, and if it puts people in a situation where they feel a little bit challenged to question what is appropriate or what they consider to be normal, I think that's okay. It's it's hard for me to put it out there. So in a way, it challenges me also, because it makes me uncomfortable to, it is very personal stuff that I'm putting out there. So it seems fair enough that I get to challenge other people too. Some of the other objects combine, again, the personal and the aesthetic. The crossword puzzles is something that I've done over a number of years. These were collected for 5 years, and they were done in collaboration with friends, sometimes with family. So they have a meaning to me about the passage of time. They've taken place over a long period, and sometimes there's scribbles or notes on them that will bring me back to a particular time. Yet they cross over into the aesthetic in how they've been put together. So the artistic process came into play as I was assembling, installing, and deciding what kind of visual impact that would make to have them all laid out. Some of the other boxes are sealed. Visually interesting to me are things that have been wrapped, bound. It's kind of activity that's an obsessive activity to seal things or to wrap things up. And although these are quite personal, those are even more so. So they're filled with things from my history that are important, that I want to keep, but that I don't want to look at. And I certainly don't want other people to look at them either, but they're genuine collections. The drawings along the back wall are all inspired by the objects that I've created, and I consider them to be obsessive drawings in two ways. One is what they're about, so they're inspired by the objects, the textures, the visual textures, the colors, the marks of some of the objects. So those things interest me into creating from what I've collected. But the act actually of making them interests me because it's such a repetitive action that I consider the drawings themselves to be quite obsessive in their creation. And you kind of get yourself into a zone where you just choose a particular mark that's based on an object that's been collected, and then repeat and repeat and repeat, making visual decisions as I'm going about how to let this object grow on the page. The work that's around the corner, there's a wall of mail that was collected over a period of about 25 years, from about 75 to a year or two ago. And it's not all up, there's lots more. But these are letters from family and friends from when I was a teenager to recently. And obviously they fit the show because they're a collection, but they're not unusual objects. I mean, a lot of people would collect that kind of thing. But what interests me about showing those is that they're from a very specific era that kids who are growing up now wouldn't have that kind of thing. Everything is electronic, and it's from a very specific time, someone my age, and the fact that I've saved all of them. But it really does pinpoint a time in history that would exist, and that would reflect a passage of time. And there's one other drawing in the other room that's made from cat fur. No cats were died or were harmed in the making of the piece, but that's also the collection. An alternative name for the piece was in lieu of taxidermy. So the idea behind the piece was really the idea that that people would want to save someone or something that was very close to them, and an alternative way of doing that would be to collect the fur, which is very similar to the idea of collecting hair from people close and storing that too. I had a interesting conversation as I was preparing for the show. I was in Office Depot and cutting invitations and scoring invitations, very repetitive work. There was a lady sitting next to me. She was stapling a bunch of brochures, and she looked over and she became very interested in the title of the show, Obsessive Collecting Disorder. Obviously, you know, it's OCD, it's very close to obsessive compulsive disorder, which is very linked with the show. A lot of the superstitions and the act of doing something over and over again is a trait of OCD. And so a lot of people, when they see the title of the show, they kind of don't read it properly, or they immediately associate with OCD, which of course is intentional. Anyway, she looked at the brochure and she said, OCD, obsessive collecting disorder. I have a friend who suffers from that. And I said, oh, well, your friend probably has obsessive compulsive disorder. She said, no, he collects things. Like, he has a really big problem with collecting things. Can you help him? And I said, no, I don't think so. And she said, well, aren't you the speaker? And I said, it's not a talk. It's an art show, and I'm the artist, and I have my own problems. I can't be helping him.